This podcast is rated E for explicit and by category of true crime contains language and descriptions of crimes not suitable for young or sensitive listeners. Like many metropolitan areas, the suburbs are where the population lives. The west side of Indianapolis is no different. But before the superstores and the widened thoroughfares, the town of Avon was more Mayberry than metropolis. The 1980s boasted a population of less than 5,000. Today, it's crowding 20,000. Avon was a small hometown with harvested cornfields back in November of 1988 when a young mother of 3 was found shot to death in her running car, just a half a mile from her home. Born Mary Lorraine Duncan, Mary Plummer was murdered without witness. 32 years later, her case remains unsolved. This is part 1 of Why Mary, and you're listening to The Cold Case Chronicles.
I know your secret. I know the truth. I know your secrets, and I'm telling on you.
I have always mourned her death in so many different ways. And I think the hardest part is mourning it through different eyes. You know, when I turned 16, it was hard, but she'd only been gone for a few years. But then when I was 18, it's like every major milestone in my life, I experienced her loss again. I would give anything just to be able to say thank you.
That was Mary Jo, Mary Plummer's oldest daughter. We'll hear more from her later. But for now, the crew goes to work, painting a picture of how we got here.
Mary was born on May 26, 1955 in Beech Grove, Indiana. She was born to Leonard and Anna Means Duncan, and she lived in the Fountain Square neighborhood, which is known for the show
Two Chicks and a Hammer.
Yes,
it's on one of those home improvement channels.
It's on HGTV. And they do a lot of fixer-uppers.
Yeah, it was a really nice neighborhood in like probably the 40s and 50s. There's duck pin bowling there. They have, I don't know if they still do it, but back when I was in high school, they had swing dancing in Fountain Square.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they have like the original diner.
Mm-hmm.
It's like in pristine condition. But yeah, so Two Chicks and a Hammer come in and they're like gentrifying the neighborhood, so it's a little bit scarier now because of that to me.
Well, so it's known more across the U.S. because of that show. So that's the Fountain Square neighborhood that she originally grew up in, and she graduated from St. Mary's Academy in 1974. When she was in 7th grade, she started dating a guy named Joe, and they stayed together throughout high school, and she got pregnant, and after graduation, they married and had a daughter and 2 sons. Just like a lot of young love relationships that start out in middle school, high school, that didn't last.
Shotgun weddings are always perfect, right?
Yes. That didn't last.
I'm unhappy. Can we have another baby?
Always.
It didn't work. I think this one will work.
Well, I'm pretty sure that they may have been Catholic. So, you know, you want to stay together for religion oftentimes, and it just didn't work out. So they ended up divorcing. Mary found herself being a single mom and having to find a job, which, you know what that's like, being a single mom all of a sudden and trying to make it on your own, right?
It's those first like 6 months are terrifying. Yeah, and that's if you have a job.
Right. And she had never had a job, so she's trying to start from nothing and build upon that to make a life for her kids and herself. So the first few years were a little rocky. And even with her relationship with her ex-husband, you know, she kind of resented the fact that he was still successful and she was struggling. And I think you can relate to that as well.
A little bit. It's not that they're successful. It's that my situation, what is your entitlement to this?
Right.
Like, I don't owe you anything, even though we were building a life together. She had babies at home to take care of, and he made enough to take care of them.
And she thought she had that forever lifestyle.
Right.
She had no reason to believe any different.
Yeah. I mean, I planned out a lot of my life based on expecting to stay married until I died.
And
everything I planned
with your kids as well. You
Yeah.
know, you plan to be an at-home mom is what she expected.
Right.
And so now she's out having to make a living. She was working at Golden Rule Insurance and barely making ends meet while her ex-husband was successful and he was able to afford all the things in life that she once had. And about 5 years after her divorce, she was working at Overland Express and she met Stephen Plummer. She was 33 and he was 28. So she was robbing the cradle a little bit on that. And they got married.
What's that difference? 5 years?
Yeah, it's not a lot. They lived with the 3 children on Maria Lane, which is now across the street from Avon High School. Of course, Avon High School wasn't there at the time, but that's where Maria Lane is. Overland Express went out of business, and she briefly worked at Golden Rule. Now, Mary was aspiring to be in real estate, so she just started real estate classes at IUPUI in Indianapolis, and she was going 2 days a week on Mondays and Wednesdays. But she decided to take a job at Lazarus department store for Christmas money. Lazarus is a department store that eventually came into Macy's. I believe Macy's bought it out.
Yeah, Macy's did buy it. And then that's when the internet started.
Yeah. Right.
So for some of you who don't know what a department store is,
right.
It's where you can buy clothes.
It used to be a place at the thing called the mall before we had to rely on internet sales.
You could buy clothes and a fridge and tools and a TV all at the same, all in one stop.
Yeah.
It was like a expensive version of Target or Walmart.
Or Sears.
Without the food.
Yeah. At this time, her children were 14, 13, and 8. And on November the 17th, it was a Thursday, 1988, Mary's husband had come home early from his job at J.B. Hunt because he wasn't feeling well. Mary was getting ready to leave for her job at Lazarus, and it was only her third night to work. And she gave instructions to her 14-year-old daughter on how to finish dinner and to save her a plate for when she came home from work. Steve told her to take his car because his work car had a cell phone on it, which was really uncommon for 1988.
Oh, yeah. That would have been like wired into the
bag
car.
Phone or, yeah. But her job was at Lafayette Square Mall, which was about a 30-minute drive. So he wanted her to be safe. And Mary left a little bit early so she could stop by her friend Lisa's house to pick up home interior that she had ordered. It's weird to see a home interior because it's been so long since I saw that.
You really should just Google home interiors.
All I think about
brand
is
decorations.
A mirror with some sort of something around it, like ivy or
but not
golden ivy.
Yeah, but it would be like gold leaf painted ivy, and then you've also got the 2 candles on the side.
Always, that's perfect description of home interior, and know that that's what she went to pick up. But she was probably extremely excited about it, just like everybody else in the 80s. Lisa was at her house. She says that her friend came over and picked up her home interior, and she stayed at her house about 30 or 45 minutes and left in enough time to make it to work by 6. Now, at around 7:45, Mary called home from work to talk to her daughter, and she said she was just simply checking in on Steve, nothing major, just checking in, wanting to see how dinner went, those type things. She told her daughter that she'd be leaving work around 9:30 and to be home at 10. So pay attention to that. She says, I'm leaving at 9:30, be home at 10, because that becomes very important. That was the last time that she was ever going to speak to her. Mary's daughter cleaned up after dinner. Her brothers and her stepfather went to bed, and then she went to bed herself at around 10 o'clock, but her mother wasn't home. A coworker later told police that Mary left work around 9 o'clock. We don't know if she knew that she was leaving at 9 o'clock or if she got off early.
So I'm trying to think, like, it would be 10 years later but I worked in a mall and the mall closed at 9. We would always be scheduled until 9:30. Now, if it were slow, we'd do all of our closing cleaning and get it done. And then we would just close our register and be out of there within 5 minutes. So maybe she was scheduled and it just expecting to leave then.
That's what I'm thinking. But at November 17th, you're looking at right before Christmas shopping is, starting to get crazy. We don't know the reasoning, but we do know that she left around 9. At around 9:45, there was a couple that was driving down 200 South, about 400 feet east of Dan Jones Road, and they spotted a car that was later identified as Mary's. The location of her car is significant for people that aren't familiar with the area because it wasn't on her route home. It was less than half a mile from her house, but it was in the opposite direction than she normally would have traveled home. And when the couple passed Mary's car, they noticed it was running and the taillights flashed 3 times. Then they remained on until the couple passed. They didn't remember seeing anyone else or seeing inside the vehicle, but the car was just off the north side of the road and it was facing westbound, and the tires were slightly onto the road. Now, at 9:57, a witness passed and reported that there were no lights on, but they did see the car was running. At 10:45, a phone call was made from a mobile phone saying that there was a female motorist who appeared to be stranded and needed help. That bothers me a little bit because I wonder how they could see that there was a female in the car at 10:45 at night on a road without streetlights when there's no lights on the car, no headlights, and at this time she was dead. Now, when police arrived at 11:05, they found the car with the engine still running, the doors were locked, her seatbelt was on, the driver's window was about 3/4 way down, and the heater in the car was on high. She had been shot twice in the left side of the face and once into the left side of her chest. It was obvious that someone was standing outside her driver's window that she was talking to, probably someone she knew because she had been waiting there for them, and they shot her through the window. So she obviously was sitting there talking to them with the window down for a period of time for her to need the heat on, and then they shot her. Now, she was murdered in a small amount of time, sometime between 9:45 and 9:57, based on the first witnesses that went by and saw the taillights flashing, and then the second witnesses that went by that saw no lights. So the investigators kind of determined that she was probably killed in that time. There were several witnesses, not just those 3 that I mentioned, that saw the car sitting there, and none of them ever saw another vehicle or another person there, which is very weird that everyone saw her car and no one ever saw an additional car at the scene.
Yeah, and especially in November, mid-November, and at night in Indiana, it drops pretty significantly.
Yeah, why would someone be out walking?
Even if they were out walking, you would have seen them by the time the police showed up.
Right.
If they were in a car, somebody would have seen that car. And I know it doesn't take long to pull a trigger, but she obviously wasn't trying to escape.
And she didn't make any phone calls from the cell phone in her car. So it wasn't like she had car trouble. And even if she had some reason to have gone past her house and was disoriented in some way and maybe was lost, God forbid, for some reason, then she was still close enough that she could have walked home, or she could have picked up the phone in her car and called. And there was no phone call made from that phone since 6:00 that afternoon. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, the only explanation is she was there to meet someone. And who was that someone? And why would she meet them there on the side of the road of all places?
It's just such a weird place.
Yes.
It is kind of secluded, there's still safer places.
Yes.
And like, if she wanted to not be seen meeting this person, there are still plenty of places around the Avon Plainfield area, which is where she's at,
Right.
that are discreet.
Right. I mean, even in business areas, behind businesses, or even in parking lots, if you're just meeting someone to pick something up or exchange something or whatever you're doing, whatever she was doing, why would you do it on the side of the road?
I know that we always say, like, now we know to be safer, and like nobody ever cared about anything back in the 80s. But I don't think that anyone would ever just pull off the side of the road and say, oh yeah, I wanted to buy your toaster from the back page of your paper, from that she saw on the back page of the Indianapolis Star.
No, and Mary's sister stated in an Indy Star article that she would have never pulled over for a stranger or even a police officer on an unlit road, because there had recently been a man impersonating a cop who was pulling women over and raping them. And there were also several other rapes in the county. People were being pulled over by random men and even putting spotlights in their face and causing them to pull over and then pulling them out of their car and raping them. And so they had the conversation between the two sisters that they would never pull over for someone on a road like that they would always go to maybe a, convenience store or somewhere well lit, even if it was a police officer.
That's so OG gangster.
Yes.
Murderino stuff. Like,
it's crazy.
So
she
aware
would have
of
been
her,
aware, right?
Just so aware of her surroundings.
Right. She would not have stopped for just anyone.
I didn't know, like, I never even thought about that until I was probably 24 or 25. And I saw it on Oprah. Oprah was like, if you think you're being followed, you take 4 right turns. And then if they follow you, you go to a police station or a fire station. Mm-hmm. 15 years before that. Wow.
Yeah, she was smart, but yet you're meeting someone
so
on this road.
So she would have only stopped for someone she knew.
She had to know this person, or at least had the intention that the person she was meeting was someone she knew
and trusted.
Where,
in relation to where she and her car were found, is her friend, the home interiors company?
The home interior person was in Indianapolis.
Okay.
Yeah, that was not close at all. Now, her purse and her cell phone, all of that was still in the car. So there were no indication that it was a robbery motive. The area where her car was, there was no house really close by. It was like a quarter mile away from any nearby house. No one in the homes around heard a gunshot at all. That was odd too, because of the timing. And there was not a silencer on the gun, because the type of gun that was used, you couldn't use a silencer on. And I'm not going to go into detail about the gun because that information hasn't been released to the public. And I'm not going to release that information because I don't want to jeopardize the case in any way. But I know that it was not the case that there was a silencer used. So it was odd that you have 3 gunshots and no one heard it, where I feel like if there was a gunshot around here, that I would hear and know what that was.
In any neighbor's defense of that, I hear gunshots only when someone points them out to me from my house, because there is a outdoor shooting range like a mile away in the middle of the country. People are shooting coyotes or something.
Well, and I don't know what it was like in the 80s, but around here now, it seems like people do the most random shit with fireworks. There's fireworks every month, and I don't even know why. It's just a random person in our neighborhood will shoot fireworks for some reason, and just to piss off every dog in the neighborhood, I believe. So maybe that was the case too. People just get immune to things like that and don't pay attention. So when police came and processed the crime scene, there wasn't a whole lot to go on. There weren't any fingerprints left. So it was very obvious that it was just a hit, because No one like had leaned on the top of the car like you would if you were sitting there talking to someone. No one had been inside the car. They had only walked up and basically just shot her unless they wiped their fingerprints. However, there were a few items that were collected, and we know DNA wasn't really a big thing then, but they did collect a few items of hair and fiber that were found on the car. And I know.
Which after driving from Lafayette Square, which was what, 8 miles away?
Yeah, 30-minute drive. You're not going to have hair and fiber on your car.
Yeah, that's not someone at Lafayette Square leaning against your car on accident. It's left there. That blew off a long time ago.
So I'm hoping that they still have that in evidence and maybe can run that through. I'm not sure that hair and fiber is really going to give a whole lot. The hair, yes, but something off of someone's shirt, not so sure. But I think it would be worth running it through the database and running it through and seeing what they could get. Now, the other things that were found, of course, were the bullets that she was shot with, because those were still behind her and inside. And so those bullets were still there.
Did they find the casings or just?
It was like a lead bullet, and one of them was a hollow point.
Okay.
And so those 3 items were submitted and should still be in evidence. Everything else about her autopsy was all normal. She hadn't been sexually assaulted. She wasn't injured in any other way. It was only the 3 gunshots.
To tie it back, that not being sexually assaulted eliminates it from being related to other crimes that were happening around the area very recently, where women were being attacked and sexually assaulted and raped.
Right. So there was no motive other than just murder. That was it. To do it in a way that left nothing behind makes me know that someone went there just for that. There was nothing stolen. They didn't take her purse. They didn't bother to do anything other than come to murder her. So it had to be personal. There had to be some reason that they were gaining something by killing her.
And to do it fast.
And to do it fast and get out. What we have to look at now is why? Who had something to gain by her being dead? There are a couple people that we're going to look at that had, a few things to gain by her death. I don't know. I'm not so sure that people are always honest. It's easy to say, we always look at the husband. Everybody wants to look at the husband. And 9 times out of 10, it's often the husband. In this case, we have a husband. We have an ex-husband. There's a lot of places that she worked recently where, why did she leave these jobs? Who did she piss off at these jobs? There's a lot of people to look at. And the police did do a lot of digging. They looked at a lot of different places, a lot of different employees, a lot of interviews, even interviews with the people that called in and saw the vehicle there, because you never know when someone might call something in and be more than just a witness. So they did their due diligence when it comes to interviews, but I feel like a few of the things weren't really followed through on that should have been. Maybe there was some things that I didn't see or that just weren't put into the case files, but we're going to kind of discuss that a little bit more in depth. And we're going to go into one suspect in particular that is no longer with us. And if he is the one responsible, it's going to be really unfortunate that he didn't live long enough to pay for what he did. We're going to have a lot more about this case. There's going to be a lot of, I don't want to say suspects because there's not a lot of suspects. There's really only one main suspect they concentrated on, but there's a lot of information about this one suspect that makes me believe that more should have been done to discount what people were saying about him, or he should have been arrested and more should have been done to put him in jail. So I'm really confused about a few things in this case, and we're going to go more in depth about that next week. And we're going to talk to a lot of the family and a couple of the other people involved in this case, and it's going to get really interesting. I hope that we can find someone around that knows more and that's willing to come forward after all these years to give this family some justice.
Yeah. And I get why it would probably be hard to find a suspect because no one saw anything. No one heard anything.
But no one keeps their mouth closed.
Next week, the crew digs in. Who could have possibly wanted to kill Mary Plummer? And more importantly, why? Please follow along on social media, Cold Case Chronicles on Facebook and Instagram, and at Cold Case Crew on Twitter. And as always,
have the day you deserve,
especially if you're responsible for the death of Mary Plummer.
I know your secrets and I'm telling all